Hey guys, welcome back. On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to build your own reusable modal components from scratch using Alpine JS and Tailwind CSS. You can of course use Bootstrap your own custom CSS as well. And these components can, are reusable, and you can have as many as you like on a single page. They will also work with Livewire. So let's take a look at the demo. So you can open up a modal. You can click outside to close it. You can close it with this close button. You can also hit the escape key to close it. You can have multiple modals on the same page. You can have headers, footers. It's customizable what kind of HTML or CSS you have inside. You can have a Livewire component inside your modals. So here I have taken one of the components we created on my Livewire course, and I have them inside, and I can run validation. All happens live, and the modal stays open. You can also trigger modals from a Livewire component. So here I have a list Livewire component with search functionality. And I can click and view one of the users, and a modal will pop up and show me their information. So for example, Prof Jesse, I can click view, and it's telling me, hey, we are viewing Prof Jesse, see their name, and I can even have specific buttons to close a modal. And you can also have a Livewire component open another Livewire component inside a modal, things like that. So let's get started, guys. All right, guys, so I have gone ahead and created an empty Laravel 10 project right over here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to include Alpine JS on our project. Now, this is an Alpine JS tutorial specifically, so I assume you know how to install it, but if you want to do a simple installation, you can go ahead on the website. I have the link in the description, and just copy the CDN link. Now, if you're using Livewire, specifically Livewire 3 and above, you don't need to include Alpine JS. It's automatically included. I will cover that at the end of the video when we are working with Livewire examples. So I'm going to go ahead, delete this. Also the style here in our welcome.blade, we're going to be using it as the layout for now. Add Alpine, and then I'm also going to add Tailwind CSS. So I'm using Tailwind CSS for the styling. You can use Bootstrap, you can use your own, or just Google. There are lots of modal CSS templates out there. You can use any of them you like. This is a CSS tutorial specifically. We are mainly focusing on the Alpine JS part. So let's go ahead. I'm going to add Tailwind CSS here as well. And in order to make it reusable, guys, you can go ahead and create a blade file for your component, for your modal, but I'm going to be using blade components because it has a nicer syntax and it gives us some extra functionality, and I like the fact that it can easily define props. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and type in PHP artisan make component, and then I'm going to name it modal. So to start off, before we actually go ahead and write the logic for opening and closing our modal, we need to actually create the HTML for it. So I'm going to create a simple modal, guys. As I showed you in the beginning, we had like a gray background, right? Kind of faded background. So I'm going to add a div for that. And then a second div, this is going to be our main content. Okay, this is going to be the modal itself. Now, for the kind of big div, the element containing the entire modal, I'm going to make it be fixed. So it's fixed on the screen. And then we also need to basically give it a z index, so it's going to be above all the other elements on the page. Okay, and then I'm also going to say inset 0. This is going to give set left, right, top, all the corners to 0. Now for the gray background, guys, this one is going to be relatively simple. So I'm going to give it a BG gray of, you could go 500 or 300, and then I'm also going to give it an opacity, so it's going to be kind of faded out. So opacity of 400. And then I'm also going to make this one be fixed and inset of 0. Technically, I don't think you need to do it for every single component, but I'm just going to add it to be safe. And if we try it out, actually, we need to include our component modal first. So I'm going to go on welcome, and in order to add a blade component, basically this is a syntax. You would have to prefix it with X. So it's going to be X modal, just like this. And then you're going to have an X modal closing tag, just like this. Let's reload. And we get a gray background just like this. So now we have our gray background. The next step, guys, now we need to actually implement the modal content part, or the body part. So let's go ahead inside here. For this one, I'm going to give it some simple classes as well. So first thing is I want to have it give it a background of white. So I'm going to say BG white. I'm going to make it rounded so it looks a little bit nicer. Rounded. Give it M auto so it's centered using margin auto. I'm going to make it fixed, similar to the above divs, and then give it inset of 0. And then you can also give it some padding if you like. I don't think I'm going to add the padding later on. I'll add it for the elements inside. And last but not least, we need to give it a max width and a max height. So for the max width, I'm going to say max W, maybe 2XL. You can use different sizing here, guys, if you would like. And also make it responsive if you like. I'm going to make it super simple, not going to add any of those things. And then last but not least, guys, for the height, we could maybe do H40. I think that's the maximum. We can go with Tailwind. For now, I'm going to hard code it to a max height of maybe 500 pixels, okay? So you're free to add any kind of styling you like or pick one from the internet. So let's take a look and see if this works right now or not. I'll do a quick reload and we get our modal showing up over here, as you can see. So it looks pretty nice. And I'm going to add another div here. I'm going to say header, and then we can have another div here. I'm going to say body. You could also add a footer. I don't think I want the footer right now. You can add that yourself if you would like. Let's do a quick reload. And as you can see, we have our component HTML. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and implement the Alpine JS functionality. So let's go ahead and start with that, guys. So in order to create an Alpine JS component, guys, you can just go ahead and add X data. And what this will do is this will make or convert your HTML element into an Alpine JS component. Now, in order to hide and show our component, we need a variable for that. So we can go ahead and set this X data equal to an array, and then create a variable for storing whether our modal is visible or not. So I'm going to name it show. And by default, obviously, our modal is going to be not visible, right? So this is going to be false. Now, in order to bind this variable show to the visibility of our Alpine component, you can say X show, and then put show here. This is going to be the name of your variable here. And this X show attribute will make it so whenever this show is true, your div will be visible, and when it is false, your div will be hidden. And we can actually test this out. I'm going to reload the page, and our modal went away. If I went and I updated this show to true, we can see it is visible. And again, to avoid any confusion for those of you that don't have experience with Alpine, guys, this show variable can be anything. Okay, you could also make it visible, and it's still going to work. So it doesn't have to be the exact same name as show. So that's the thing. So now that we have made it visible, guys, in order to make this so it's toggleable, we can control, close, and open it from inside and outside our component. We can use events or browser events. And this is very easy to do with Alpine JS. So we can define two types of events, and you can listen for events on Alpine using X on, and then give it the event name. So here I'm going to say open modal. So I'm going to listen for events of open modal. Now you need to also give it .window. This will make it so we will listen for the events anywhere on our window. If you don't give this, it will only listen for events triggered from inside this specific Alpine component. So this window is very important. And if we receive this event, go ahead and basically set show to true, right? So if we receive this event, make the modal visible. We can also go ahead and kind of create the opposite of this, maybe close modal, and you can name these anything you like. The event name doesn't have to be open modal. You can have it be open and close. And that's all we have to do. So now our modal is, we can toggle it on and off. Now, in order to do that, guys, we need a button to do that. So I'm going to go ahead on our welcome.blade, come over here, and I'm going to create a button, and I'm going to give it some simple styling, maybe px of 3, py1, bg till 500, and I'm going to also give it text white and rounded. Okay, so I'm going to say open modal. So let's take a look at the button. I do need to hide our modal show false. And let's see if we can see our button. It's over here. I'm also going to give some padding to our page. So it's not, so we have a modal. Now, in order to open our modal, since we are using events in Alpine, these are browser events, we need to emit an event. And then our modal will receive the event and show itself or hide itself. And this one should be false, by the way. I made a typo. So this one is very easy to do. In order to dispatch an event using Alpine, first you need to convert your button into an Alpine element component. You can do that by using X data. It can just be X data empty. And then you can give it a click listener or a click event of X on click. And to dispatch an event, you just say $dispatch, and then what kind of event you want to dispatch. So here we are doing, what did I name it? I named it open modal. So we can go ahead and type in open modal over here. And I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing for the close. Although I'm going to put the close button inside the modal itself. So let's go ahead and try this out. I click on open, and as you can see, guys, our modal opened up just like that. Now we do have one issue. I believe I didn't fade out the gray background. I'll do that in just a second. So now we need to implement the close functionality. So when we click on the outside of the element, like on the gray background, we closed it. If we press the escape key, we want to close it, and maybe we can add a close button inside the modal itself. So let's go ahead and implement that. So the first thing I forgot to add here is, I believe I did opacity for 400. This should be opacity 40. Now we have a nice kind of a faded look. That's very good. Now, in order to make this close when we, for example, hit the escape key, that's very easy to do in Alpine JS. You can do X on, and this will go ahead and create an event, and we can then listen for key down. So this is for when a key is pressed down, and then whatever key you want to listen to. So in our case, we want to listen for escape key, and we also will say window, so it will listen for it when the button is triggered from anywhere on our window. And then if that happens, we can say show equals false, right? So basically hide our modal when we press the escape key. One more thing we need to do, guys, is when we click on the gray background, I also want to hide our event, our modal. We can say X on, click, and then show equals false. And this is the gray background. I'm going to add some comments here. So we have it here. And then here I'm going to say modal body. Okay, so basically when we click on the gray background, go ahead and hide or set show to false. So let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to reload the page, open up the modal. If I click on the gray background, it goes away. If I hit the escape key, you guys can't see that I'm pressing it, but I just hit it and it closed my modal. Again, I put my mouse inside. If I click on the white area or the body, it doesn't go away. So we have implemented the close functionality. Now, next thing I'm going to do is inside the header, I'm going to add a close button. Later on, we will improve the styling for this one. But for now, in order to add a close button, we can just go ahead and create a simple button. It can be an A-link or even an icon if you guys like. And I'm going to put an X for closing it. And in order to close it, it's going to be very similar to what we did for opening. Okay, we can do X on click. Now, in order for this X on click to work, you need to have that X on click inside an Alpine JS component. So in this case, our button is not inside an Alpine JS component, so we just add X data. But in case of our close button, it is inside an Alpine component already, so we don't need to do that X data. So I just wanted to explain that. And then instead of open, we can say close modal. Okay, just like that. Let's do a quick reload. Click on it. If I click on the X, we close the modal itself. Super cool stuff. So now that we are done with that, guys, I would like to also cover how we can actually make this kind of title and body part customizable. So this is relatively easy to do. We can use blade components to do this. So for the title, I'm going to basically go ahead and use a prop. And to define a prop in modals is very easy to do. You can, in components, you can go ahead and say, use the blade directive props. And then here I'm going to say title. Okay, now we will be able to accept a title prop, and then I'm going to replace it over here and say $title. Now this could potentially be null in some cases in case someone forgets. So I'm going to use the null operator and set it to maybe an empty title. One more thing we could do is maybe add an if statement and say if title, and then only show the title in that case. Okay, so it's up to you how you want to basically define it. I'm going to give it some styling as well, maybe py of 3. And then flex, items center, and then maybe justify center as well. So let's take a look at this. Let's see how it looks. And it says undefined variable title. I do need to say is set. And now we can see our modal show up. So in order to pass this title to our modal, it's very easy to do, guys. You can go ahead here and as a prop, you can basically just say title and then equals to test, just like that. So this is the benefit of using blade components. It has a very nice syntax for passing props. So I'm going to open it up, and as you can see, guys, we can see our title down here just like this. So we can do a kind of a similar thing for our body, but instead of props, we're going to be passing data because I would like it to be dynamic, so we can pass in HTML. So this is done using slots. I can just go ahead here instead of body here and say echo body, just like that, super simple. And then to pass a body to our modal, inside this X modal, make sure you have an opening and closing tag. You can use slot directive, or you can also say X slot. Both of those will work. So I'm going to say slot and then body. And then inside here, you can type in or add any kind of HTML you want. So I'm just going to add maybe, I don't know, span here and say body tag test, and maybe give it some padding of 5. Okay, something like that for now. We're just testing it. Later on, we will add some proper things, and that's it. So now we can go ahead and reuse our modal as many times as we like. And we can also pass in any kind of HTML we want inside it. And it works quite well. And it's quite customizable. Again, you can change the HTML, CSS any way you like. Now, we do have some limitations, guys. So right now, if we have two modals on the same page, our code will stop working. So I'm going to go ahead and create another modal. And this one is going to be modal 2. Right now, our modal will not work. When I click on open modal, we don't have a way of telling our Alpine modal which one we want to open, whether we want to open modal number 1 or modal number 2. So now we can, if you just have a simple use case, you can use the code we have right now. But if you want to have multiple modals on the same page, we need to add some additional code. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, guys, now let's go ahead and make it so we can have multiple modals on the same page. Now I'm going to go ahead and replace this slot directive with this syntax. So if we are consistent here, so I'm going to say X slot, and I'm going to add the closing tag. Functionality is going to be exactly identical. Now, one thing I would like to do, guys, is whenever we open or dispatch an event to open a modal, I would like to also pass an extra argument or data, maybe an array, and then define the name of the modal I would like to open. Okay, so in this case, let's assume we have a name on this modal, and I can pass in the name and only open that specific modal. Okay, so here, for example, I'm going to say test. And maybe on our modal itself, we can have a prop of name and define the name on it. Okay, so in this case, I'm also going to say test. So let's go ahead and implement this functionality. So as I mentioned, we are right now passing an extra argument on our dispatch. In order to receive this, it's very easy to do. We can actually go ahead here and on our open modal, I'm going to do a console.log. And one thing you can do is you can actually receive the data that was sent. And it is done by using event.detail. I'm just going to go ahead and echo this so we can see what's going on. So I'm going to basically save this. Let's go ahead, reload. I'm going to open up my developer tools. Click on open modal. And as you can see, guys, we get the object that we sent, right? You can see we have name and test. So I can go ahead and actually receive this name using this event.detail. And the easiest way to do this, guys, I'm going to say show is equal to, I'm going to have an inline conditional and say if event.detail.name is equal to our blade component name. So obviously we have the prop here, but we are not using it. So I can go ahead and add name here as well. And for simplicity, I'm going to add an extra data to our X data called name. And I'm going to set it equal to this name prop that we received. So now I will have access to this name data. And I can say if event detail.name is equal to name. Obviously, if it is, it will return true. So we will show the modal. And we can do a kind of similar thing for the close modal as well if we want, but it's going to be the opposite, okay? Just like that. Actually, for closing it, we always want to close it, right? So because we don't have multiple modals on the opened at the same time, we don't need to do it for the closing. But that should get the job done, guys. So let's go ahead and reload the page. I'm going to click open modal, and our modal showed up. As you can see, modal number 2. If I go ahead and I'm going to save this and change our modal name from test to modal 2, it should not open anymore. I'm going to reload the page, click on it, and as you can see, it doesn't open anymore. If I go ahead and say modal 1, or sorry, test, it will open up again. Now, we also have one more issue. I'm not sure if you guys noticed. If I reload the page quickly, sometimes we can see our modal before the page loads. And that's dependent on how fast Alpine can load and kind of hide our component or our Alpine component. One thing we can do is we can just give it a display of none. Okay, so I'm going to say style, display, none, and this will make it so our modal is hidden when we open up the page. So right now we have a reusable blade component for our modal, and we can have multiple modals. So I'm going to go ahead and create another modal. Give it ID of modal 2. This one maybe can be modal 1. And then we can have separate buttons to open and close these modals. So here I'm going to say open modal 2. Just like that. Now let's go ahead and test this out, guys, and see if it works or not. So we have two modals and we have two buttons to open it. So let's come over here. I'm going to click on open modal 1. We get modal number 1. I'm going to click on open modal 2. And as you can see, we get modal number 2, just like that. Very easy to do. Now, if you would like to do animations as well, guys, you can use Alpine JS to do that. It's relatively easy to do. The easiest way you can add animation is just by doing x-transition. And Alpine will just go ahead and actually add a simple transition for you. As you can see, we get a nice looking animation right off the bat, so you don't really need to do much. If you would like to customize the duration of the animation, you can say .duration and then pass in some date time. Okay, so let's say 500 milliseconds. Now that's a bit too slow for my taste, so I'm gonna go and leave it with the default it came with. Just like that. Now you can customize the animation a little more for the transition, kind of opening up and closing animation. So if you want to do that, go on the Alpine website and search for transition. And if you scroll all the way down, guys, there is a section for X transition, and you can actually define different types of opacity and duration and things like that for all the stages of the animation, just like this. So I'm not going to be covering that, but it is something you can do as well if you would like, and give it, different timing, open up quickly, the size, the opacity, how you would like it. I like the functionality of the default. It's very nice. So now that we have covered this, let's go ahead, guys, and test it out with some real world examples. Let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, guys, so let's see how we can actually use our modals with Livewire. So now before we actually code anything, there is one thing you need to know. Livewire automatically injects Alpine JS when you have installed it. However, there is a catch, and that is Livewire does it when you have a component or a Livewire component on the page. If you don't have it, it won't inject Alpine JS. So in this case, for example, I don't have any Livewire components. So if I try to run my modals, it's not working. The moment I add a Livewire component to the page, here I have an example one, my modals will start working. So you need to be careful of that. If you want full control over it, and you want to use your modals on pages that you don't have Livewire components on, you can either manually add Alpine on those pages or disable auto injecting. And you can do that by basically publishing the Livewire components by running php artisan livewire publish config. And once you do that, open up the configuration. And if you scroll down, there is a section called inject assets. And you want to actually go ahead and, by default, it is true. You want to set it back to false. And this will make it so Livewire will stop injecting its assets automatically. So I'm going to save this. And if I reload the page, I'm going to actually add our component back in. So obviously our component broke and the modals don't work. So in order to fix that, you can go ahead and manually add Livewire styles and then Livewire scripts. And this will fix it, obviously. And it will also work whenever you don't have a component or a Livewire component on the page. Just like that. So just something to keep in mind. Now, the next use case is whenever you want to add a Livewire component inside your modals. So this is very easy to do, guys. For example, let's say I want to add a registration form inside this modal. I can just go ahead and just include it inside this X slot body that we created. So I'm going to say Livewire, and I have a component on this. I built this on my Livewire course. You guys can go check out the playlist. I have it in the description, but it's a simple registration form. I'm just going to say register form and add it over here. And if I reload the page, I can see my registration form, and it will work just fine. You can do validation. You can even create, a user. Okay, so let me go ahead and create a random user here and click create. It will go ahead, do it, and even show a success message. Now, what if you want to close the modal after there is a success message? Now, you can do it by using timeouts if you would like. But you can also do it from your Livewire component. So it's very easy to do. You can use events. So I'm going to go ahead and find our register form component. And right now, this is the method that is creating the user. Okay, so what I can do is if I want to close my modal, I can dispatch a close modal event. So I can say this dot dispatch. If you're using Livewire 2, this is going to be emit, but I'm going to say close modal. Okay, and this will go ahead and close our modal. And how do I know this is close modal, guys? Well, if you go on our modal itself, we have again this event of close modal, and this will close any open modals, all open modals. So that's it. And if you guys want the full code for the modal, I have updated it a little bit. I have it in the description. You can go check it out, pick it up from GitHub page, or you can just copy what I have over here. So now what this will do is this will make it so we close our modal when we create a new user. Let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to open it up, create a new user. Hit create. It will create the user and then close the modal. So if you want to close the modal from inside your Livewire components, you can do it using $dispatch. However, if you don't need to perform any action on your component, just use the Alpine approach, okay? Because when you're using this way, you need to send a request to your server. Just keep that in mind. Now, another use case you may have is maybe you want to open a modal from the Livewire component, kind of the opposite. So let's take a look at an example like that, guys. I actually have another component, which is like a table of sorts. So I'm going to uncomment it. It's called users list. I also built this on my Livewire course. Looks like this, and we have a simple search bar, as you can see. And I also have a simple view button. So what I want to implement now is whenever I click on this view, I want to show basically that specific user's details. This is the demo I showed you at the beginning of the video, guys. So let's go ahead and implement this functionality and end the video. So let me open up my registers users list component so you guys can see it. I have a property of search and a property of the selected user. So the selected user is whichever user we click view on, okay? And then here I'm getting all the users in my computed property. So let's go ahead and first implement this view button. I'm going to open up my blade file. And here we have a simple for loop. Okay, don't forget about wire key, very important. And this is our view button. I'm going to add a wire click on it. I'm going to say wire click. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, go ahead and run, execute this view user, okay? So I'm going to say view user, and I'm going to pass in the user in the loop. You can also pass in user ID, and Laravel will go ahead and perform model binding. So both of it will work. And very easy. So basically, when we view the user, I'm going to update the selected user. Now, in order to open a modal, we can go ahead and say this.dispatch. The exact same thing we did for closing it. We can now say open modal. Now, for opening a modal, we also need to give the modal name. So here I'm going to say name user details. Now, we don't have this modal yet, guys, so we need to actually go ahead and create it. And I think I have a typo here, this patch. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this modal right now, guys. Very easy to do. I can come over here, and under my loop, I'm going to go ahead and add our modal. So I'm going to say X modal. I'm going to give it the name of user details. The name should be exactly the same as the one you're using to do the dispatching, okay? So I'm using user details. And I'm going to give it a title of view user. And let's also add the closing tag, X modal. So now inside our X slot body, we can go ahead and display the user's details, okay? Very easy to do, guys. We can basically just do, I'm going to do something simple. I'm going to say name equals to this dot selected user. And again, you need to use a property to store the user that was selected or clicked on. So that's why we are using the selected user property and display the name. And I'm going to add a BR tag, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for the email as well. Just like this, guys. Now, there is something you need to be careful, and that is whenever we launch or open up the component for the first time, the selected user is going to be null. So we will get an error message if we are using it, in this case. So one thing we can do is we can add an if statement and only show the modal if the selected user is not null. So I can just say selected user, and this will check if it's null or not, and then only show the modal if it is not null. I'm going to say end if. Let's format it, and that's all we have to do, guys. Super simple stuff. Let's go ahead and test it out. Hopefully everything works as expected. I click on view. It opens up. I click on the second user. It opens up, and we can see ASDF. I'm going to search for another user. Jesse, I'm going to click on Jesse, and we get Prof. Jessica, vis-a-vis. So as you can see, it is working. Now you do need to be careful, guys. Make sure you have this wire key. If you don't have this wire key, you may face some issues because this view user might not be updated properly. And that's the very basics of it, guys. You can have, modals, use it in any context you would like. Now, if you want to have modals inside modals, like have child modals or multi-step modals, you can also do that, but it's going to require more implementation. There's actually a modals package for Livewire. If you guys like, I can make a video about it. But in this video, I wanted to show you guys basically how you can build your own modal from scratch and give you a deeper understanding of it, so you can use it, in different contexts and different applications. And that's it, guys, for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this video, or I hope you learned something new. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section below. And don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe so you get notified of my latest videos, especially Livewire and Alpine JS videos. And I see you guys on the next episode. Have a great day. Bye.